The psychology of people who never explain themselves. There's a type of person who walks through life leaving questions in their wake. They make decisions that confuse you. They act in ways that seem contradictory. They hurt people, help people, disappear, reappear. And when you ask them why, they offer nothing. No justification, no defense, no explanation. And what's strange is that their silence doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like power. But here's what most people don't understand. The refusal to explain yourself isn't always a sign of confidence. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's the most carefully constructed defense system a person can build. Because the moment you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving others the power to judge you. But you also stop letting them understand you. And somewhere between those two things, something dark begins to grow. Her name was Elena. She was 32, worked in architecture, lived alone in a minimalist apartment with white walls and almost no photographs. People described her the same way: distant but not rude, confident but not warm, magnetic but impossible to get close to. If you asked her a personal question, she'd smile slightly and change the subject. If you challenged her decisions, she'd nod politely and walk away. If you accused her of something, even if it wasn't true, she wouldn't defend herself. She simply didn't engage. Her co-workers found it unsettling. Her dates found it intriguing at first, then frustrating. Her family had long given up trying to understand her. And Elena preferred it that way. Because in her mind, explaining yourself meant asking for permission. And she had learned a long time ago that the world doesn't grant permission to people like her. So she stopped asking. She stopped explaining. And she told herself it was freedom. It started small. A project at work fell apart. Her design had been questioned by a senior partner who didn't understand her vision. He called her into his office, asked her to justify her choices, to explain why she'd ignored the client's initial requests. She sat across from him, calm, silent. "I'm waiting," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up and left. 2 weeks later, she was removed from the project. Her closest friend, Iris, confronted her at a coffee shop. "Why didn't you just explain? You had a good reason. You could have defended yourself." Elena stirred her coffee slowly. "I don't owe him an explanation." "But you lost the project, Elena." "I didn't lose it. I chose not to play the game." Iris stared at her. "You know what I think? I think you're scared." Elena's expression didn't change. She set down her cup, stood, and walked out. No explanation, no defense, just silence. And for the first time, it didn't feel like strength. It felt like running. What Elena didn't realize, what most people like her don't realize, is that the refusal to explain isn't about confidence. It's about control. When you explain yourself, you give someone else access to your internal world. You expose your reasoning, your emotions, your vulnerabilities. You hand them the power to validate or invalidate you. And if you've been invalidated enough times, your mind learns something dangerous. Silence is safer than exposure. People who never explain themselves often experience something early in life: criticism that didn't stop no matter how much they justified themselves. Parents who dismissed their feelings. Partners who twisted their words. Environments where explanations were used as ammunition. So they adapted. They built walls made of silence. And those walls worked. They kept the judgment out. They protected the ego. They maintained an image of someone who didn't need approval. But here's the thing about walls. They don't just keep pain out. They keep connection out too. Because when you refuse to explain yourself, you're not just withholding information. You're withholding access to who you are. And eventually, people stop trying to understand you. They just start assuming. Elena's silence became a pattern. When her mother called, asking why she never visited, Elena didn't explain that family gatherings made her feel like she was suffocating under 1,000 unspoken expectations. She just said she was busy. When a man she'd been seeing for 3 months asked why she always pulled away whenever things felt close, she didn't tell him that intimacy terrified her more than loneliness. She just stopped replying to his messages. When Iris sent a long text apologizing for calling her scared, asking if they could talk, Elena read it 7 times and never responded, because in her mind, explaining meant admitting something, and admitting something meant being wrong, and being wrong meant being weak. So she chose silence. But silence, when used as armor, becomes a prison. The more she refused to explain, the more isolated she became. The more isolated she became, the more she told herself she didn't need anyone. The more she believed that, the colder she grew. And slowly, without realizing it, she started to disappear. Not physically, but emotionally. She became a ghost in her own life, present but unreachable, visible but unknowable, alive but not truly living. Because you can't be fully seen if you never let anyone understand you. And you can't be fully loved by people who only know your surface. 3 months later, Elena found an old journal. She'd written it when she was 16. The handwriting was messy, emotional, raw. One entry stopped her cold. I tried to explain to Mom today why I didn't want to go to the dinner. I told her I felt anxious around Dad's family, that they always make me feel like I'm not good enough. She said I was being dramatic. She said I needed to stop making everything about myself. So I stopped talking. And she looked relieved. Elena stared at the page. She'd forgotten that moment, but her body hadn't. Her mind had learned something that day, something it had been repeating ever since. Your explanations don't matter. Your feelings are a burden. Keep them to yourself. And suddenly, she understood. Her silence wasn't strength. It wasn't confidence. It was a survival strategy that had outlived its usefulness. She had spent years protecting herself from people who wouldn't listen, by refusing to speak to people who would. She had confused self-preservation with self-isolation. And the saddest part? She had become exactly what she feared. Someone who made others feel like they didn't matter. Because when you never explain yourself, you send a message, whether you mean to or not. You tell people, you're not worth the effort of being understood by me. And eventually, they believe it. Elena sat in her apartment that night, staring at her phone. Iris's unanswered message was still there. For the first time in years, she let herself feel the weight of her own silence. She thought about all the people she'd walked away from, all the relationships that had ended not because of conflict, but because of absence, all the times she could have been understood, if only she'd been willing to be vulnerable. Her hands shook as she typed. I'm not good at this. I don't know how to explain myself without feeling like I'm asking for permission to exist. But I'm trying. I was scared. You were right. And I'm sorry I didn't say that sooner. She stared at the message for 10 minutes. Every instinct told her to delete it, to protect herself, to stay silent. But she pressed send. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like loneliness. 2 hours later, Iris called. Elena almost didn't answer, but she did. I don't need you to explain everything, Iris said softly. I just need to know you're still in there. Elena closed her eyes. I am, she whispered. I'm still here. Here's the truth most people don't tell you. You don't owe the world an explanation for everything you do, but the people who love you, the people trying to understand you, you owe them access. Not justification, not defense, not proof that you're right. Just honesty. Because the refusal to explain yourself can feel like power, but real power isn't in silence. It's in the courage to be misunderstood and still choose to be seen. The people who never explain themselves aren't always the strongest. Sometimes, they're the ones who've been hurt so many times that they've forgotten what it feels like to be heard. And they mistake distance for dignity. But you can protect yourself without disappearing. You can set boundaries without building walls. And you can be strong without being silent. The most dangerous prison isn't built by other people. It's built by the version of yourself that's too afraid to be known. If this made you question the walls you've built around your own silence, subscribe, because the stories we avoid telling ourselves are often the ones we need to hear the most.